With the United States government in the midst of a partial government showdown, history has shown that low-wage federal contractors, security guards, and maintenance workers will likely continue to suffer, even after an agreement is reached. RT's Rachel Blevins has the full story.
The partial government shutdown has entered its third week, and while politicians argue about solutions here in Washington, the Americans who have dedicated their work to the federal government are the ones facing the biggest impact. The Senate Appropriations Committee is estimating that more than 420,000 federal employees are being forced to work without pay, including agents from the FBI, ATF, DEA, and CBP, and staff from the State Department, Coast Guard, IRS, and Homeland Security. The shutdown is being felt at U.S. airports where TSA employees are starting to call in sick. It is estimated that 51,000 TSA employees involved in the screening process may not see paychecks as early as this Friday. In the meantime, an additional 380,000 federal workers have been placed on temporary leave. Employees who have been through this before are concerned about whether they will ever be fully compensated for the lack of pay during the shutdown.
They give you this mass letter that, okay, you can present this to your creditor and let them know that, you shut down, but you will get paid. That creditor can care less about that letter. This is not my first shutdown. I've been with the Internal Revenue Service over 25 years.
Following a 2-week government shutdown in 2013, more than 850,000 federal employees received back pay, but more than 700 maintenance workers and security guards and 500 food service workers who were considered government subcontractors did not.
As a contractor, I'm in an interesting position that, unlike a employee of the federal government, I'm not allowed to work and I will not get back pay.
In some states, volunteers have stepped up to help clean up trash and take care of national parks, and private companies have pitched in to help pay employees to keep the parks open. A few dozen lawmakers have agreed to either forfeit or donate their salaries during the shutdown, but the overwhelming majority of Congress is facing scrutiny for continuing to cash their paychecks while members of the public face an uncertain future.
We're almost the pawns in a political chess game, and it has nothing to do with us. We're federal employees. We're apolitical. We're not supposed to have opinions on these things.
In response to the concerns over the lack of pay, President Trump claimed he could relate and said he believes he still has the support of many federal workers. However, it remains to be seen just how long that support will last as hundreds of thousands of Americans face the reality of life without a paycheck. In Washington, Rachel Blevins, RT.
For more on the government shutdown and the new pitch President Donald Trump says he will give to the American people Tuesday night, we are joined by our 360 Views tonight with Progressive Talk Radio host Jeff Santos. Thanks for joining me, Jeff.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Great. So the president is now going to do a primetime speech Tuesday night talking about the border wall, followed by a trip on Thursday to the southern border. Does this give you any idea you think that the president's position is starting to weaken?
Oh, I think so. I mean, look, it goes now without saying that he has no concern for the American people. He never really has. This is all about him and his popularity, his ratings, and that's all really he cares about. And it's a tragedy because 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. About 800,000 to 1 million of them who have been basically put off and shut down are now without ways to buy groceries, to pay their rent, and so forth.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because the question is for Republican, what is more damaging, do you think? Is it more damaging that Trump caves and doesn't give funding for the wall, or that he continues this government shutdown that eventually possibly most of these employees that are full-time employees will get their money back? Which one do you think is going to be more politically damaging for them in 2020?
Well, I think all of them are going to be damaging. I really do. I mean, look at this. I mean, he has put all his eggs into the basket of this border wall. Meantime, people are working 2 or 3 jobs. They are focused on the day-to-day lives. Their health care is going up. He's not addressing that, neither is the Republicans. They're not, in some cases, if you are a person of color, you don't even have a chance to vote in a lot of states, as we saw in Georgia and Florida. If you look at the fact that a lot of Americans, trying to send their kids to college, it's outrageously expensive. The housing costs, none of these issues are front line for the Trump and the GOP. That should be the national emergency, not this phony crisis at the border. That's what the national emergency is, all those issues I just laid out, plus climate change, which is a world crisis.
That's the thing, Jeff. Republicans would respond back to you and say, the reason why we're having the issues with the economy and health care and education and people having to work 2 or 3 jobs to support their families is because a lot of these jobs have been taken by those illegally here that are not paying into the system, or that the health care system is having to pay for people not paying in. How would you respond to that argument by Republicans that are being made on Capitol Hill even today?
All right, so these folks who come across, walk 2,000 miles with their babies in their hand, they all of a sudden are going to take a job from somebody who's making $35,000 or $50,000 a year. This is the excuse that people use. There are people who will not work in the fields that have been known to have immigrants from Central America going back to the days of Cesar Chavez. There are certain jobs. Now, I am for a policy, and actually I agree with Donald Trump on what has happened into outsourcing good jobs that have been, making air conditioners or cars or whatever the case may be in the industrial Northeast. But let him focus on trying to, what happened with General Motors? This is an example that these are real issues that don't get discussed. And it's not going to help, if you take, 6 people that have come through the border, from what I understand, in the last, last year in 2018, 6 people.
Yeah, but
really.
But there's only one terrorist that's needed. That's what people would. How many terrorists did we have on 9/11? How much damage can one person do, unfortunately? But that is one argument that's being disputed right now, whether or not that's a valid issue or not going forward. So let's talk about this. There was a deal given to the Democrats. We're given the offer that for exchanging, give President Trump his wall in exchange for amnesty for the Dreamers. It was rejected in the past. Considering the situation where we're on week 3 of this government shutdown, do you think Democrats should be willing to consider this deal at this point to make it, just to get us back up and running?
No, and I'll tell you the reason why. It shouldn't be upon the Democrats to save the day. The President of the United States is elected by every citizen in this country who decides to vote, and of course he didn't win the popular vote. He actually lost that. He won the Electoral College, fair and square. But Nancy Pelosi represents 800,000 people, and that's the city of San Francisco, her district. She's represented by a certain few. Even the great state of New York and Schumer. It's not the Democrats' responsibility to give in. It's the responsibility of the President of the United States to find a way to do this. And he knows quite well that this bamboozle effort that he has is only to really save his behind.
Well, we will see how this all plays out, hopefully sooner rather than later, for those hardworking individuals that do live paycheck to paycheck. Thanks for joining me, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.